I've been called a lot of things in my 62 years. Frugal, careful, old-fashioned. But I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter-in-law would call me a monster on the internet. Let me back up. My name is Margaret Wilson, and I'm a widow. Have been for 8 years now. My husband Robert left me this house when he passed, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighbourhood where people still wave to each other from their porches. It's not much, but it's paid off. And it's mine. When my son Daniel and his wife Jessica asked if they could move in temporarily while they saved for a down payment, I didn't hesitate. Daniel's my only child. Of course I said yes. That was 2 years ago. I didn't charge them rent, didn't ask for grocery money. I figured we were family and family helps each other out. Sure. My social security check was tight some months, but I'd lived through tighter times. I knew how to make a dollar stretch, how to buy the store brand instead of name brand, how to clip coupons and wait for sales. Jessica didn't work. She was building her online presence, whatever that meant. She spent most days on her phone, filming herself doing makeup tutorials or talking about her life. Daniel worked in IT, decent job, but somehow they never seemed to save anything. There was always a new phone to buy, a weekend trip to take, a concert they couldn't miss. I kept my mouth shut. Not my business how they spent their money. The incident that changed everything happened on a Thursday. Jessica's aunt was coming to visit, and Jessica asked me to pick up groceries for a nice dinner. She handed me 3 $20 bills that morning, her nails freshly manicured in that ombre style she liked. "Just get the basics, Margaret," she said. She always called me Margaret, never Mom or even Mrs. Wilson. "Some chicken, vegetables, maybe a nice dessert, nothing fancy." I looked at the $60 in my hand and didn't say what I was thinking. That $60 wouldn't buy a taxi ride to the grocery store and back, let alone a meal nice enough for company. But I nodded and got my purse. At the store, I did what I've always done. I bought what was needed, good chicken breasts, not the cheap ones, fresh asparagus, potatoes, a decent bottle of wine, a bakery cake that looked homemade, bread, butter, everything to make the kind of meal that shows you care about your guests. The total came to $147. I paid the difference from my own account, the one I kept carefully balanced in my checkbook. It was fine. Family helps family. The dinner went beautifully. Jessica's aunt raved about the food. Jessica beamed and accepted the compliments like she'd done the cooking herself. I washed dishes while they laughed in the living room. That should have been the end of it. 3 days later, my neighbour Linda knocked on my door. Linda's lived next door for 20 years, raised her kids while I raised mine. She had her phone in her hand and worry all over her face. "Margaret, honey, I think you need to see something." She pulled up a video. There was Jessica, sitting in what I recognised as my guest bedroom, eyes red and puffy, tissue in hand. "I just don't know what to do anymore," Jessica was saying to the camera, her voice breaking. "My mother-in-law is so controlling about money. I gave her $60 to buy groceries for a simple family dinner, and she made me feel like it wasn't enough. She gave me this look, like I was being cheap. I'm trying so hard to save money while we live here, but she expects me to fund everything. It's like she thinks we're made of money." I watched, my face perfectly still, as Jessica dabbed at her eyes. "I know she's letting us stay here, and I'm grateful. I really am. But the way she counts every penny, the way she makes me feel guilty for asking her to help with anything, I just feel so trapped. My husband won't stand up to her. And I'm starting to wonder if she even wants us here, or if she just likes having people to boss around." Linda paused the video. "Margaret, there's 12 more like this. She's been posting them for weeks. People are commenting, calling you all kinds of names. I thought you should know." I handed the phone back to Linda. My hands were steady. "Thank you for showing me." "What are you going to do?" I smiled, the way I've learned to smile when I'm deciding something important. "I'm going to think about it." That night, I sat in my bedroom, the master bedroom that I'd offered to give up when they moved in, but Jessica had said was too old-fashioned for her taste. And I did think about it. I thought about the $60, about the extra 87 I'd added without mentioning it, about the 2 years of free rent, free utilities, free food most of the time because I did the bulk of the grocery shopping and never asked for reimbursement. I thought about Jessica, crying to thousands of strangers about how terrible I was while living in my house, sleeping under my roof, eating food I bought. I didn't cry. I've never been much of a crier, even when Robert died. Tears don't solve problems. Action does. The next morning I called Thomas Realty. Thomas had sold us this house 30 years ago, and his son ran the business now. Margaret Wilson, I said when he answered. I want to put my house on the market. Oh, are you thinking about downsizing, moving to a condo? I'm thinking about a change, I said. How fast can you sell it? In this market, with the neighbourhood, 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we price it right. Price it to move, I told him. I want it sold fast. As is. But it has to be vacant for the new owners. There was a pause. Margaret, I have to ask. I know what I'm doing, Thomas. Send the paperwork. Next, I called my lawyer. The same one who'd handled Robert's estate. I had him pull the deed, verify the title, make sure everything was clean and in my name alone. Robert had been smart about that. He'd wanted to make sure I'd never be vulnerable if something happened to him. You're sure about this? My lawyer asked. As sure as I've ever been about anything. I didn't tell Daniel, didn't tell Jessica. I went about my days normally, made dinner, watched my shows, nodded politely when Jessica talked about her latest video getting 2,000 views. The house sold in 9 days. Cash offer, 10,000 over asking. Buyers who wanted to move in by the end of the month. That gave me 3 weeks. I accepted the offer on a Monday morning while Daniel was at work, and Jessica was in her room filming another video. Probably about how oppressed she was, living rent-free in a house she didn't own. That evening, I made pot roast, Daniel's favourite. I let him finish eating before I spoke. I have some news, I said, my voice calm and pleasant. I've sold the house. Daniel's fork clattered against his plate. Jessica's head snapped up from her phone. What? Daniel said. I sold the house. We close in 3 weeks. The buyers want it vacant, so you'll need to find a place by then. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Mom, Daniel started, his voice pitching higher the way it used to when he was a boy and wanted something. Mom, you can't just sell the house without telling us. It's my house, Daniel, my name on the deed. I can do whatever I want with it. But where are we supposed to go? Jessica was standing now, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. We don't have enough saved for a deposit and first month's rent. We were counting on staying here while we saved. Then I guess you shouldn't have spent the last 2 years buying concert tickets and new phones. My voice was still pleasant, conversational even. You shouldn't have spent your time making videos about how terrible I am instead of working. Jessica's face went white, then red. You saw those. Linda showed me. All 12 of them. I stood up and started clearing dishes. It was quite an education, watching you cry about how I gave you a look when you handed me $60 for a $147 grocery bill. I didn't know it cost that much. You didn't ask. You just assumed I'd make up the difference and never mention it. Like I've been making up the difference on everything for 2 years. Rent, utilities, food, all while you told the internet what a monster I am. Daniel was silent, looking between us like he couldn't quite process what was happening. You're doing this because of some videos? Jessica's voice cracked. You're throwing us out because your feelings got hurt? I turned to face her fully, and I let her see something I usually keep hidden. The steel that got me through raising a child alone after my first husband left, through putting myself through night school, through burying my second husband and learning to live with the silence. I'm not throwing you out because my feelings are hurt, Jessica. I'm selling this house because I learned something important from those videos. I learned that no matter what I do, no matter how much I give, you will always find a way to paint me as the villain. So I decided to stop trying to be the hero. Where will you go? Daniel finally found his voice. That's my business, honey. Just like where you go is yours. This is insane, Jessica said. She was scrolling through her phone now, probably already composing her next video. You can't just kick out your own son. I'm not kicking out my son. I'm selling my house. There's a difference. You both have jobs. Well, Daniel does. You have 3 weeks. That's more notice than a lot of people get. But Mom. Daniel. I cut him off, not unkindly. You're 35 years old. You've been a grown man for a long time. I've done my part. I raised you, loved you, gave you a place to land when you needed it. But I'm done being treated like an ATM with a bad attitude. Jessica slammed her phone on the table. Fine, we'll go. And everyone is going to know what kind of person you really are. Cold, selfish, cruel. They already think they know thanks to your videos. At least now I won't have to see the comments. The next 3 weeks were tense. Jessica moved through the house like a storm cloud, filming herself packing, crying about how her evil mother-in-law was forcing them into homelessness. Daniel tried to talk to me several times, but I stayed firm. They found an apartment, 1 bedroom, not nearly as nice as my house, but it was theirs. They had to take out a loan for the deposit. I felt no guilt. Closing day came on a bright Tuesday morning. I signed the papers, shook hands with the buyers, a young couple with a baby on the way, who looked at the house like it was a palace, and took my check. Then I went home one last time. Daniel and Jessica had moved their things out over the weekend. The house felt strange, empty, full of echoes. I walked through each room remembering. The kitchen where I'd taught Daniel to make pancakes, the living room where Robert and I had watched the news every night, the guest room where Jessica had filmed her videos, creating a fictional villain to explain why her life wasn't what she wanted it to be. I didn't cry. I just closed the door behind me and got into my car. But I didn't drive to the apartment I'd supposedly rented. I didn't go to the senior living facility Jessica had smugly mentioned in one of her videos. I drove to the airport. See, here's what they didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone. The house sold for $470,000. After paying off the tiny remaining mortgage and closing costs, I walked away with $452,000. Robert had also left me a decent life insurance policy and a pension. My social security was small but enough. I had savings I'd never touched, built up over years of living carefully. I wasn't poor. I'd never been poor. I'd just been smart, living below my means, never touching my nest egg. Now I sat in the airport terminal, my single suitcase beside me, my boarding pass on my phone, and I allowed myself to smile. Attention passengers, Flight 247 to San Diego is now boarding. I stood up, gathered my things and joined the line. San Diego first, where I'd rented a hotel room with an ocean view for a month. After that, maybe Santa Fe, or Charleston, or anywhere else I'd ever wanted to go but never had the time for because I was too busy being a wife, a mother, a homeowner, a responsible person. I'd spent 62 years taking care of other people. Now I was going to take care of myself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a string of missed calls from Daniel. A text. "Mum, where are you? We need to talk." I turned off my phone and dropped it in my purse. They'd figure it out. Daniel had a job. Jessica had her internet following. Maybe she could monetize all that sympathy she'd been farming. They were adults, and adults figure things out. That's what I'd done at their age, and at every age since. The flight attendant scanned my boarding pass and smiled. "Enjoy your flight, Ms. Wilson." "I intend to," I said. 3 hours later, I was standing on the balcony of my hotel room, looking out at the Pacific Ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that didn't look real. The air smelled like salt and freedom. My phone was still off. It would stay off for a while. I'd checked Facebook earlier, out of curiosity. Jessica had posted another video, this one angrier than the others. She was talking about how I'd abandoned my family, how I'd sold the house out from under them with no warning, how I'd disappeared without even saying goodbye. The comments were different this time, though. People were asking questions. Where had I been living while Jessica was making videos about grocery money? Why hadn't they been paying rent? If they'd been saving for a house for 2 years, where had the money gone? Someone had done the math on one of Jessica's videos and pointed out that her purse alone cost more than 6 months of groceries. Another person noted that she'd been on 3 vacations in the past year. The narrative was shifting. Not everywhere, not all at once, but enough that people were starting to see the holes in Jessica's story. I didn't need them to. I didn't need vindication or apologies or for anyone to understand. But it was satisfying anyway, in a small, petty way I wasn't ashamed to feel. I poured myself a glass of wine from the bottle I'd bought at the hotel gift shop. Expensive wine, the kind I'd never let myself buy before, and raised it to the ocean. To living below your means, I said to no one, until you don't have to anymore. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm. I had coffee on the balcony, watching surfers catch waves in the early light. Then, I walked down to the beach, let the water rush over my feet, felt the sun on my face. I had no schedule, no one to cook for, no videos being filmed about me in the next room, no one's expectations to manage but my own. I spent the day wandering through the Gaslamp Quarter, eating fish tacos from a food truck, browsing bookstores, sitting in a park and reading without anyone asking me when dinner would be ready. That evening, I treated myself to a nice restaurant, sat at the bar, and talked to the bartender about the best beaches in the area. "You here for vacation?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. "I'm recently retired." "What did you do?" I thought about that. What had I done? Raised a son. Kept a home. Managed a budget that stretched dollars into miles. Survived loss. Endured ingratitude. Stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. Gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left but resentment disguised as family obligation. I was in property management, I finally said, but I'm done with that now. Days turned into a week, then 2. I extended my hotel stay. I took a painting class. I went whale watching. I bought clothes I actually liked instead of whatever was on clearance. I ate meals without calculating the per-serving cost. I thought about Daniel sometimes. Wondered if he was okay. Hoped he was learning to stand on his own feet, to build a life that didn't require anyone else's foundation. I didn't wonder about Jessica at all. 3 weeks into my trip, I finally turned on my phone. The messages were overwhelming, dozens from Daniel, a few from distant relatives I barely knew, even one from Linda. I read Daniel's first. The early ones were angry, confused, accusing me of abandoning him. But as the days went on, they changed. He apologized, said he'd been thinking, said he'd been so focused on keeping Jessica happy that he'd forgotten to think about anyone else, including me. Said he hoped I was okay, wherever I was. The last message from yesterday. "Mom, I get it if you don't want to talk to me. I understand. I just want you to know that I love you. And I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry." I sat with that for a long time, watching the sun set over the ocean again, this view I'd paid for with years of careful living and one act of fierce self-preservation. Then I typed back, "I love you too, honey, and I forgive you. But I'm not coming back to save you anymore. You have to do that yourself." His response came immediately. "I know, I'm trying. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," I wrote. "I'm happy." And I was. Sitting there on that balcony with nothing but time and possibility ahead of me, with no one to answer to and no one to shrink myself for, I was happy in a way I hadn't been in years. They'd called me cheap, controlling, difficult, a monster. But what they'd really meant was that I'd set boundaries, that I'd expected contribution, that I'd dared to want respect in my own home. Well, I didn't have a home anymore. I had something better. I had freedom. That night, I made a plan. San Diego for another 2 weeks, then Santa Fe for a month. After that, Charleston in the spring. Maybe I'd rent a small apartment somewhere eventually. Or maybe I'd keep traveling. I could live modestly on the road for years with what I had in the bank, and modestly for me meant beach views and good wine. I opened my laptop and looked at flights, at hotels, at cooking classes in Tuscany and art galleries in Paris, at all the things I'd told myself I was too old for, too poor for, too responsible to want. I wasn't too anything. I was exactly right, exactly enough, exactly what I'd always been. A woman who knew the value of what she had and wasn't afraid to keep it. My phone buzzed. Another video notification. Jessica had posted again. I almost didn't watch it, but curiosity got the better of me. She looked tired in this one. No makeup, hair in a messy bun. The apartment behind her was small, cluttered. "I think I owe someone an apology," she started, and I nearly dropped my phone. She talked about learning to budget, about realizing how much things actually cost, about getting a part-time job, about growing up, essentially, though she didn't use those words. "I blamed my mother-in-law for a lot of things that weren't her fault," she said. "I made her out to be this terrible person because it was easier than admitting I was scared and entitled and taking advantage of someone's kindness. Margaret, if you ever see this, I'm sorry. You deserved better." I closed the video. Maybe she meant it, maybe she didn't. Maybe it was just another performance for a different audience. It didn't really matter. I wasn't doing this for apologies or recognition or to teach anyone a lesson. I was doing it for me. I finished my wine, opened my notebook, one of those fancy ones with thick pages that I'd never let myself buy before, and started making a list. Not of places to go or things to see, though I'd make those lists too. This was a different kind of list, a list of things I'd learned. 1. Living below your means is only valuable if you eventually get to live. 2. You can love someone and still need to let them figure out their own life. 3. Other people's stories about you aren't your responsibility to fix. 4. Peace is worth more than being right. 5. It's never too late to choose yourself. I looked at that last one for a long time. Then I underlined it twice. The ocean whispered against the shore below, and somewhere in the distance I could hear music playing. Someone was having a party, living their life out loud. I was doing the same thing, just quieter, just mine. Tomorrow I'd wake up without obligations. I'd have coffee and make plans or not make plans. I'd exist in the space I'd created for myself, the one I'd paid for with years of quiet sacrifice and one final liberating choice. They could call me whatever they wanted. Cold, selfish, cruel. I called it freedom. And freedom, I'd learned, doesn't require anyone else's approval. I closed my notebook, turned off the lamp, and went to bed in my hotel room with the ocean view balcony in the city where no one knew my name or my story or anything about me, except that I was a woman traveling alone with a smile on her face. That was enough. That was everything. Because the truth they'd never understood, the truth I'd finally learned myself, was this: you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for them is to simply walk away and let them find their own light. And I'd found mine finally at 62 years old, with salt air in my lungs and the whole wide world ahead of me. They could keep their videos, their drama, their narrative about the terrible mother-in-law who abandoned them. I'd keep my peace. And between the two, I knew which one I'd rather have.